Imagine isolated towers standing against raging seas, their lights meant to guide the lost. But what if they're beacons for something darker, pulling in horrors from the deep? Welcome back to the Vile Echoes, where tonight we uncover disturbing lighthouse confessions. 3 chilling accounts from real Coast Guard veterans, shared like Reddit tales that will make you question what's lurking in the fog. Stick around till the end. You won't believe the twist in the final one that still haunts its teller. These stories aren't just creepy. They're the kind that make you rethink ever stepping foot near the water after dark, where the line between duty and dread blurs into something truly unforgiving. So dim the lights, get your blanket on and get ready. Our first vile echo flickers from a remote Oregon coast, where a simple repair job turns into a desperate fight against the unknown. Listen to The Beacon That Wouldn't Shine, a tale that starts with routine but spirals into unrelenting terror. It's the kind of experience that leaves even the toughest keepers questioning their sanity. My uncle was a lighthouse keeper for the U.S. Coast Guard for nearly 20 years, stationed up and down the Pacific coast, from the misty shores of Washington down to the rugged cliffs of California. He's the type of man who doesn't embellish. Straight facts, no drama. Always focusing on what needs to be done without wasting words on nonsense. He retired a few years back, but he shared this with me over beers last summer, and it stuck with me because he still gets quiet when he talks about it. His eyes drifting off like he's back there in the isolation. This was in 2014, when he was sent to a remote spot called Grays Point Light off the Oregon coast for a routine check. It's a tiny rock outcrop, barely big enough for the tower and a small supply shed, surrounded by churning waves that crash endlessly against the jagged stones. No fresh water, no power except the solar panels and generator that hum through the constant wind. Usually these trips are quick, 2 or 3 days solo to test systems and clean up storm damage, with the ocean's roar as your only companion. He arrived by boat on a calm day, the sea unusually still, almost like it was holding its breath. Everything normal at first glance. The light was automated, but it needed manual calibration every few months to ensure it pierced the fog that often blanketed the area like a shroud. He unpacked his gear, set up his cot in the cramped base room, and got to work. First day, he ran diagnostics on the electrical systems, climbing the narrow, echoing stairs to inspect the massive lens that rotated high above. Nothing out of place. No burnt wires. No corrosion beyond the usual salt buildup that came with the relentless spray from the sea. He spent the afternoon scrubbing the exterior, the cold wind whipping at his jacket as he balanced on the narrow walkway. The drop to the rocks below a constant reminder of how alone he was. As evening fell, he cooked a simple meal on the portable stove, the smell of canned stew mixing with the briny air, and settled in with a book, the light's beam sweeping rhythmically across the walls like a metronome. Nothing out of place until that first night. He bunked in the base room, listening to the waves crash like always, a sound that had lulled him to sleep on countless assignments before. Around 3 a.m., he woke up to complete darkness. No rotating beam sweeping the room. No familiar flash cutting through the night. The light should have been flashing every 10 seconds, a reliable pulse that sailors depended on. He grabbed his flashlight, the beam shaking slightly in his hand from the sudden wakefulness, and climbed the spiral stairs to the top, each step creaking under his weight in the oppressive silence. The mechanism was grinding away as usual, gears turning with their mechanical precision. But the bulb wasn't lit. The entire tower plunged into an unnatural void. Wedged in the gears was a piece of wet rope, thick and slimy to the touch, smelling like low tide and decay that made his stomach turn. He pulled it out with gloved hands, the fibers clinging stubbornly, figuring it must have blown in somehow through a crack, though the hatch was sealed tight against the elements. He tossed it over the railing into the sea below, watching it disappear into the black waves, and went back to bed, chalking it up to bad luck or a freak gust, though sleep didn't come easy after that. Next night, the same thing happened all over again, almost like clockwork. He woke up to no light once more, the tower feeling colder, the air thicker with that same salty rot. Climbed up, his footsteps echoing louder in the stillness, and found another rope jammed in. Longer this time, knotted like it was tied by hand with deliberate care. Dripping seawater that pooled on the floor and had barnacles stuck to it, fresh from the depths. Doors were locked from the inside. No signs of entry or tampering anywhere. He radioed base about equipment issues, his voice steady but his mind racing. But they said to hold tight and wait for pickup in 2 days. As the weather was turning, he started feeling watched after that, like invisible eyes were tracking his every move from the corners of the room. The waves outside sounding more like whispers. He double-checked the locks, shone his light into every nook. But the isolation was getting to him. The vast ocean stretching out endlessly under the starless sky. On the third night, the light failed again, pulling him from a fitful sleep with that same ominous darkness. This time, when he reached the top, the hatch was open, despite being bolted shut earlier. Wind howling in like a scream from the void, carrying the stench of dead fish and something metallic, like blood. The rope was there, but coiled around the bulb like a noose, tight and unyielding. And scratched into the metal floor in jagged letters was S-T-A-Y. The marks fresh and deep as if carved by claws. His heart hammered as he pried it free, the rope almost resisting, slipping in his grip like it was alive. He noped out, barricaded himself in the base with whatever furniture he could move, the cot, the supply crate, and waited for dawn with his knife out, every creak of the tower making him jump, the waves pounding like footsteps approaching. When the boat came at first light, he left without explaining much, just grabbed his gear and got off that rock as fast as he could. The tower's shadow feeling like it was following him across the water. Later, he heard the light failed permanently, a month after, flickering out during a storm, and they decommissioned it entirely, citing unexplained malfunctions. No one knows where those ropes came from, but old logs he dug up mentioned a shipwreck nearby in the 40s, where the crew drowned after their lines snapped in a gale. Bodies never recovered, lost to the currents. Uncle swears something from that wreck was climbing up from the depths, trying to keep the light off so no one would see it coming, perhaps to claim the tower as its own, or to drag the living down with the dead. He never took another solo assignment after that, sticking to land-based duties until retirement. And even now, he avoids the ocean at night, saying the dark water holds grudges. A beacon that beckons the dead is chilling, but what if the light itself calls out, drawing you into the abyss with a voice that knows your name? Our next confession echoes from California's foggy shores, where the call becomes impossible to ignore. My girlfriend's dad was a park ranger for the National Park Service, covering coastal areas in California from the rugged northern beaches to the southern cliffs. He's a no-nonsense type, former Marine, all about facts and survival, with a mindset forged in discipline and practicality. He doesn't believe in ghosts or anything supernatural, dismissing such talk as excuses for fear. But he told us this over dinner a couple years ago, and his hands were shaking the whole time, his usual steady gaze avoiding our eyes. It happened in 2019, during a maintenance stint at Cape Blanco Lighthouse, a historic spot on a bluff overlooking the ocean, perched high above crashing waves that erode the land bit by bit. He was there alone for a week to update wiring and check for erosion, the kind of job that tests your nerves with endless solitude. He volunteered for the assignment, thinking it would be a quiet break from the usual park patrols, with the lighthouse's beam as his only company at night. The first few days were routine, inspecting the tower's structure for cracks from the constant salt spray, testing the foghorn that blared like a mournful cry, logging weather data as storms brewed on the horizon. Nights were lonely, just the beam sweeping the sea in rhythmic flashes, and wind rattling the windows like impatient fingers. On the third night, he heard a voice calling his name from outside. Tom. Tom. Faint, like it was carried on the breeze, blending with the ocean's roar. He stepped out with a flashlight, the beam cutting through the thickening mist, thinking maybe a hiker was lost on the trails below, or a boater in distress. But the bluff was empty, fog rolling in thick like a living thing, swallowing the landscape. Shook it off as the wind playing tricks, perhaps an echo from the cliffs, and went back inside, though sleep was restless after that. Fourth night, it happened again, louder this time, right below the tower, as if someone was standing just out of sight. He leaned over the railing and shone the light down, nothing but waves crashing against the rocks far below, foam glowing white in the beam. But as he turned back, the voice whispered from the stairwell inside. Tom, come down, clear and insistent, sending a cold spike through his chest. Heart pounding, he locked the door and stayed up top till dawn, pacing the narrow gallery with his radio in hand. The lights sweep revealing nothing but endless dark sea. Next morning, he found wet footprints on the stairs, bare feet, small and perfectly formed, leading up from the base but stopping halfway, like whatever made them vanished mid-step into thin air. He radioed for early relief, saying he felt ill, his voice steady, but his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. On his last night, the light started flickering without reason, the beam stuttering like a dying heart. He climbed to fix it, each step echoing louder in the confined space, and found a handprint on the lens, small, like a child's, smeared in salt water that dripped down the glass. The voice came then, clear as day from all around. "Tom, join us," accompanied by a low moan that vibrated through the metal. He bolted down, but the door was jammed, wood swollen as if soaped from within. When he finally forced it open with his shoulder, the footprints were fresh, leading out to the cliff edge where they simply ended, as if the maker had stepped off into the void. Rescue came at first light. They found him curled up in the base room, muttering about the drowned ones, and clutching his flashlight like a lifeline. Turns out, the lighthouse was built over a site where a family shipwrecked in the 1800s. The kids' bodies never recovered, dragged under by the currents, their names lost to time. Dad quit soon after, trading the coast for inland parks. He says the sea remembers every soul it claims, and sometimes it calls you back, one name at a time, until you answer. Voices from the void are bad enough, but a shadow that hunts through the mist can turn isolation into pure dread, creeping closer with every breath. Our final confession drifts from the British Columbia coast, where the fog hides the unthinkable, and the darkness takes form. My buddy Alex worked as a tech for the Canadian Coast Guard, maintaining lighthouses along the British Columbia coast, from the stormy northern inlets to the foggy southern islands. He's level-headed, the kind of guy who fixes problems without panic, relying on tools and training rather than luck. Not one for tall tales or exaggeration. He keeps things factual. He confided this to me after a fishing trip last year, saying it still keeps him up at night, his usual calm demeanor cracking as he recounted it. This was in 2018, when he was assigned to a place called Ivory Island Light, a remote station on a tiny islet, surrounded by treacherous waters that claimed countless ships over the years. It was a 3-day job to upgrade the solar panels and check the foundation for cracks caused by relentless waves. Solo, as usual, with only the radio for contact. He got dropped off by helicopter on a clear afternoon, the pilot joking about the isolation as he flew away, leaving Alex with the roar of the sea. The tower was old but sturdy, with a small keeper's hut attached, stocked with basics like canned food and a generator that hummed reliably. Days were fine, calibrating equipment under the gray sky, sealing leaks in the structure where salt had eaten through. The usual grind of preventive maintenance to keep the light guiding vessels safely. Nights, the fog was brutal, turning the island into a white void that muffled sounds and made the world feel smaller, more confining. On the second night, he heard scratching on the hut door, slow, deliberate, like nails on wood dragging with intent. He opened it with a crowbar ready, heart rate spiking in the silence, but nothing there. Just fog so thick he couldn't see his hand extended, swirling like it had a mind of its own. Figured it was debris from the tide or an animal, though no wildlife lived on that barren rock. The isolation pressing in heavier after that. Third night, the scratching returned, but from inside the walls this time, echoing through the thin partitions like something burrowing. He shone his light around the cramped space. No rats, no holes in the weathered wood, just the chill of the air seeping in. Then the foghorn failed abruptly, its deep blare cutting off mid-note. He climbed the tower in the dark, flashlight beam trembling slightly, the stairs creaking under his boots like warnings. At the top, the lens was covered in handprints, dozens, all sizes from child small to adult large, pressed from the inside like people trapped in the glass, fingers splayed in desperation. The scratching turned to banging, echoing from below the floor as if from under the island itself. He radioed for evac, voice shaking despite his training, saying, "Structural failure," to avoid sounding crazy, though he knew it was more. Waiting in the hut, he saw a shape in the fog outside. Tall, humanoid, but distorted, like it was made of mist and shadow, shifting unnaturally. It pressed against the window, face flattening against the glass, whispering, "Stay, fix it," in a voice that sounded like multiple layered over each other, pleading and commanding at once. The chopper came at dawn through clearing skies. They found him barricaded inside with every piece of furniture piled against the door, walls scratched with "Don't leave" in frantic gouges that weren't there before. The official report said wind damage and fatigue, but Alex quit coastal work shortly after, moving inland where the fog couldn't reach. He heard later the light's history. A crew drowned in a storm in the 20s, bodies lost to the currents, their final logs speaking of shapes in the mist, calling them out. He thinks they want company, pulling at anyone who comes, with whispers and scratches, trying to fill the void left by their loss. He avoids the coast now, says the fog hides things that remember being alive, and once they see you, they never let go. And with that, our lighthouse confessions fade into the fog, leaving behind echoes of isolation and the unknown that might just keep you awake tonight. If these tales sent chills down your spine, hit that like button. Share your own eerie experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the Vile Echoes for more heart-pounding horrors. Your next nightmare is just a click away. Stay safe out there. Or don't. Sweet dreams. Who knows what shadows are watching from the waves? Turn on notifications so you never miss the next vile echo that could be lurking closer than you think.